Right now, I am standing in the very heart and center of Rosario, Argentina, the third largest city in the country of Argentina. Here in the Rosario metropolitan area, some 1.5 million people live. Right now, I am standing in Plaza 25 de Mayo, the 25th of May Plaza, very common name for central plazas in cities here in Argentina. That is a national holiday here in Argentina. It actually just happened a few days ago. It celebrates the first independent government of Argentina. So a very important date here in Argentina. I'm here at the end of May, like I said, so we are less than a month away from the beginning of winter here in the southern hemisphere of the world. And so it's a pretty chilly day. It's a very sunny day, so we've got the solar energy, but temperature-wise it is pretty chilly. It's about 12 degrees, 11, 12 degrees centigrade, about 50, 51 degrees Fahrenheit. So a pretty chilly day. You can see around me in the plaza that many of the deciduous trees here have lost about half their leaves. They're changing color a little bit. Latitude-wise, Rosario is about the same latitude as the kind of middle of the South in the United States. So I do believe, like, say, Charlotte, North Carolina, I think is about the latitude of Rosario, Atlanta, Georgia. So the climate here in Rosario is not going to be so dissimilar to places like Atlanta, Georgia, or Charlotte, North Carolina. Fairly mild winters, no snow, but very hot and humid during the summer. Now, we'll kind of walk into the city a little bit. We have this statue here, 1883. I don't know what that date is a reference to. Rosario was actually founded in 1793, so only a couple decades before Argentina became an independent country. Now, that's actually pretty young by the standards of major cities here in Latin America, as most major cities that you're going to encounter in Latin America were founded in the 1500s and the 1600s. So Rosario was actually founded very late by the standards of Latin America. And in fact, when Charles Darwin, the legendary British explorer and naturalist who created the theory of evolution, when he went on his famous journey through South America, he actually passed by Rosario in, I believe, 1849, and he described it as a city of only a couple thousand inhabitants. So even in the mid-1800s, this city only had a few thousand inhabitants. And it wasn't until the late 1800s and the early 1900s when massive waves of millions of immigrants from mostly Southern Europe, particularly Italy, came here to Argentina and settled in the fertile pampas. That is when Rosario began to rapidly grow, and it became what it is today, one of the principal ports of Argentina, one of its most important industrial regions, and like I said, the third largest metropolitan area, very close in size to Córdoba. Now, Buenos Aires is enormous, 15, 16 million people, depending on your definition of the metro area. It's almost half of the population of Argentina, which is geographically the largest country in the Hispanic world. And I do believe like the 7th largest country in the world. So Argentina is enormous, but outside of Buenos Aires, it is actually very unpopulated. And even though we're in the third largest city, it's only 1.5 million people in the region. So this would be a pretty small, mid-sized regional American city if this was the United States. So this is actually still a pretty small city. Now, Córdoba is slightly larger, but only barely, only by maybe 100,000, 200,000 people, depending on your definition of the metropolitan area. So Rosario, Córdoba, about the same size. Rosario is a little bit smaller, but Buenos Aires is just so enormous. It just sucks up all of the demography and energy and economy here in Argentina. It really is something of a problem, actually, for Argentina's development. It really is actually an issue that so many people in the country, in a country with so many natural resources in terms of agriculture, mining, oil, with so many natural resources that could be exploited and exported, it's actually a big problem that so many people in Argentina live in the capital. But I digress. Anyway, we'll walk a little bit into into the city here. I'll show you a little bit of the city as I talk. Now, Rosario is quite interesting. It is the most violent, the most dangerous city in Argentina by quite a wide margin, actually. The murder rate here is roughly 5 times the murder rate of the rest of Argentina. And Argentina is one of the safest countries in Latin America, but by the standards of Europe or much of Asia, it's still a pretty dangerous country. And so we're talking about 5 times the murder rate of what would be a fairly dangerous country by the standards of Europe or Eastern Asia. And so the reason for that is because Rosario is this major port, ocean-going ships can travel up the Paraná River. This city became a major region or major center for the export of narcotics. Marijuana will be produced in Paraguay, cocaine will be produced in Bolivia, and then it will come here to Rosario to be distributed across the world, loaded onto ships and distributed across the world. And then this created kind of a culture of crime, and it kind of fed in on itself. Anyway, this is the Metropolitan Cathedral of Rosario. This is the most important Catholic church here in the city of Rosario. Very beautiful structure, unfortunately under construction. Next to it is the municipal building, kind of the city hall, as we would say in the United States, of Rosario. A very beautiful building as well, but the facade is completely covered by construction, so we can't see it, unfortunately. But anyway, we'll walk a little bit further here, and we'll get into some kind of monumental plaza, very beautiful. Now, when I told people in Buenos Aires, I was there for a couple of weeks before coming here. When I told people in Buenos Aires that I was going to Rosario, they would go, "Why are you going to Rosario? It's so dangerous. There's nothing to see there. What are you doing there?" And I would say, well, it's the 3rd largest city in Argentina. There's only 3 cities in Argentina with more than 1 million people. There's really only 3 cities in Argentina. Rosario is one of them. So I have to go to Rosario if I want to say that I have something of an understanding of the Argentinian people. But yeah, the people in Buenos Aires were very negative towards Rosario. And in fact, there is actually a belief among the people of Rosario that there is in Buenos Aires a kind of anti-Rosario conspiracy. That the elites of Buenos Aires have, throughout the generations, throughout the centuries, have conspired to keep Rosario down. And that if it wasn't for the meddling and the anti-Rosario sentiment of Buenos Aires, then Rosario would in fact be a much grander and more beautiful and wealthy and powerful city. And I think there is actually a lot of legitimacy to that opinion, because the capital of the province that we're in, Argentina is divided into provinces, and the province that we're in right now is called Santa Fe. Córdoba, the province that Córdoba is in, is called Córdoba province, and Córdoba is the capital of that province. And in most parts of the world outside of the United States, because the United States is a very strange country, but in most countries in the world, the largest city of a province or a state or a department, whatever the terminology is, the capital of that administrative division is almost always the largest city. And here in Argentina, that is the case for most of the provinces as well. But here in Santa Fe, the capital of Santa Fe is not Rosario, by far the largest city. It is actually a city up the river, a couple, I think 150 or something kilometers up the river, another city called Santa Fe, which is like less than 1/3 the size of Rosario, and it's the capital. And so many people in Rosario believe that if Rosario was the capital of this province and it received the attention and respect and investment that it deserves from Buenos Aires, that this city would be by far the 2nd largest city in Argentina, with perhaps more than 2 million, 2.5 million people in the metropolitan area. And I think that there's probably actually a lot of legitimacy to that claim. Now, this city is a very beautiful city, in my opinion. A lot of very beautiful turn of the century European architecture, neoclassical, Art Deco, very beautiful. It's laid out on a very, very regular grid system. If you're watching this video, I encourage you to look at Rosario on Google Maps and go into the satellite view and just look at how incredibly orderly the grid is. It's one of the most orderly gridded cities I've ever been to in the world. And so it's really very nice and easy to get around. The buildings are beautiful. It's quite clean, I would say. It's really a lovely place. And I would say also it has by far the nicest skyline in Argentina. They say about Buenos Aires that Buenos Aires is famous for being the city that turned its back on the sea, that turned its back on the river. But here in Rosario, we're very connected to the Paraná River, and so if you go down to the river and you look out at the city, it has a very beautiful skyline. And so this city has a lot of, I would say, untapped potential in a lot of ways. Now, we'll walk through this region here. This, I believe, was built in the 1960s. The Argentinian flag, the iconic blue and white flag with the sun in the center, that flag was actually designed here in Rosario. And so this monument that we're going through is actually a monument to the flag of Argentina. It's a very beautiful monument. Yeah, you know, when I first came into Rosario, I took the bus from Buenos Aires. It's a 4-hour bus ride, something like that, 4.5 hours, if there's no traffic, if the roads aren't closed. And when I got off the bus, there was just an enormous police presence. I have never seen as many police in any city in Latin America as I have here in Rosario. There are so many police around. And so clearly there is something of a desire to change its reputation as being the most dangerous city in Argentina. But for me, of course, as a foreigner, it is a little bit intimidating seeing this large police presence. I remember when I checked into the little apartment that I'm staying in here in the historic center, I remembered an armored vehicle, kind of an armored personnel carrier rolling by me. I think it said federal police on it. So yeah, a little bit scary, but you know, that's all right. Oops. You know, I think as long as you know, I've been to many cities in the world that are more dangerous than Rosario. So even though it is the most dangerous city in Argentina, it's nothing compared to some of the cities that I've been to in Central America or even other parts of South America. Now we see here this beautiful monument, I think built in 1963, something like that, to the flag. Really beautiful. There's so many beautiful monuments and so much beautiful architecture here in Argentina. In fact, I would say that per capita, it's probably the best in Latin America. In terms of just the sheer amount of beautiful neoclassical European style architecture and monuments here in Argentina, there's just nothing like it anywhere else in Latin America. And I think that it really does show the kind of Italian demography here in Argentina, because the Italians are known around the world for building beautiful buildings and monuments, beautiful stonework, beautiful statuary, and yeah, you can really see the Italian demography whenever you're going around through Argentina. Now we'll quickly try to go to the Paraná River here, and that's where we'll end our little video and discussion about this beautiful city. The Paraná River that we'll hopefully be seeing soon is actually the second longest river by length in Latin America. And I believe it is also the second or third largest by discharge. So the Amazon, of course, is first in both counts. And then I believe the Orinoco in Venezuela, I believe has a higher discharge, but isn't as long. And then here, the Paraná, second longest, and I believe the third largest by discharge. And so ocean-going vessels, large cargo ships, can come all the way up here to the port here in Rosario. In fact, they can continue on even to Santa Fe, and sometimes even a little bit beyond that. So it is a major, major river. Yeah, quite a lovely place. And yeah, so it's quite fascinating. You know, if you come here to Rosario, and we have the beautiful giant Argentinian flag there. Now, if you come here to Rosario, like many cities in Latin America, it is somewhat racially segregated. And so if you go north of the center, that's going to be the wealthier part of town. It's going to have a more European demography. And then if you go south of the historic center, you're going to have a more Amerindian demography. It's going to be poorer. That's where most of the crime and violence was, at least historically, concentrated here in Rosario. It's quite fascinating. Yeah, I mean, the north of the city is actually very nice. It has a little bit of that feel of kind of Italy meets Miami. It's really nice. Now we'll quickly cross this little expressway here to get to the river. Crossing the street is never easy in Latin America, but we'll do it. We've got a police officer here rolling by. You'll see them in just a moment behind me. The lights are flashing here in Argentina and in many countries in Latin America. The police officers keep their lights flashing all the time. It's kind of fascinating because in Europe or the United States, you're not going to see that. So it is kind of interesting to see that. Hopefully we'll be able to run across the street here once this truck goes by. Do a little jaywalking, but that's okay. When in Latin America. You know, Argentina is a very fascinating place because in many ways I think that being in Argentina, it kind of feels like being in a place, it was like if Italy and Peru had a baby together, that would be Argentina, because you have those waves of millions and millions of European immigrants, particularly Italians, coming in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, giving the character to places like Buenos Aires, here in Rosario, Córdoba. But then you also have that pre-existing Amerindian population who also mixed with the Spanish colonists. And so you have the Amerindians, the mestizos. They were primarily in the north. You know, when Argentina became independent, the largest city in Argentina was actually Tucumán, in the far north of Argentina. It was actually slightly larger than Buenos Aires. And so historically, the population, if you came to Argentina hundreds of years ago, when it was called, I do believe, the Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata, the population was heavily centered in the north. And there was actually very few people living in the south. And it wasn't until those European immigrants from Italy and other places in Europe came in the late 1800s and the early 1900s that the Pampas became populated. The areas that we're in, like here in the Pampas on the banks of the Paraná River, there was very, 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 very few people living here until European immigrants arrived fairly recently. And so it really is a fusion of kind of Peru meets Italy, where those three cultures, the Italian culture, the Spanish culture, and that Andean, Amerindian culture, coming together to create kind of modern Argentina. Very fascinating. And also, because Argentina is one of the richest and safest cities or countries in Latin America, it has always been a place that has attracted a lot of immigration from other parts of Latin America. If you're from Venezuela or Colombia, places in Latin America that are more poor and dangerous than here in Argentina, and you maybe don't want to move to the United States or Canada or Germany or somewhere there like this, or maybe you can't due to legal reasons, maybe you want to stay in that more Spanish-speaking, Hispanic, Latin, Catholic culture. Argentina is a very attractive destination. And so because of that, you're also going to see a lot of people from other parts of Latin America when you're here in Argentina. And here in Rosario, even though Rosario is not a major destination for in-migration for Argentines from other parts of Argentina, you do see a lot of people from places like Bolivia, Peru, Paraguay, Venezuela, Guatemala, Dominican Republic here in Rosario. Now we're right here now on the banks of the Paraná River. You can see it behind me. Look at that, it's a huge river. And you can see on the other side, there's no development at all. There's no construction. In fact, that's kind of a lowland, swampy area, and you're gonna have to go quite a ways before you get to solid ground where there's more construction, there's little villages, quite a ways. And so it's kind of fascinating. There's no development on the other side of the river. And you can actually see behind me, way in the distance, there is a beautiful modern bridge. I believe that bridge wasn't constructed until I think the 1980s, something like that. It's a pretty recent modern bridge. So no development on the other side of the river, very fascinating. And you can see behind me, we have these enormous ocean-going vessels. That's a giant cargo ship right there. Looks like it might be containing agricultural exports. That's what I would guess. A lot of agriculture comes down this river. This is one of the most navigable rivers in the world. I mean, it really is an incredible seaway. And so, yeah, I mean, Argentina it's rich by the standards of Latin America, but it could be even richer if it had more stable governance and a more evenly distributed population. There was more exploiting of the richness of the land. It could be an even wealthier country. Of course, given the demographics, probably, like I said, because it is Peru meets Italy, and so probably the highest extent of development that you'd see in Argentina would probably be somewhere in between Italy and Peru. But it could be even richer than it is today. But it still is a pretty nice country by the standards of Latin America. But anyway, you can see the skyline kind of behind me, the high rises there, back there, high rises back there. Yeah, well, I can say, honestly, even though Rosario does have the negative reputation in Argentina and it is known as a very dangerous place, I've been walking around quite a bit. I've seen a lot of the city and I like it. So I think that if you're in Argentina and you want to really understand the Argentinian soul, you can't skip Rosario. It's a wonderful city, very beautiful, incredible architecture, interesting culture. I highly recommend it. Well, until next time, from here in beautiful Rosario, ciao.